back, everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast, a draft episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. Got Kipp Adams and Ben Wolk with me. You're hearing this on Thursday. We're recording this on Wednesday before I go up to the SEC tournament in Nashville. And it's one of my favorite episodes that we do every single year. Usually do a couple of these, but this is the Spring Breakouts draft. Where we are going to take turns drafting Georgia Bulldogs that we think are going to make a lot of noise during spring practice, guys that by the end of spring we're going to say, hey, watch this guy. This guy's making a move. I want to shout out Justin Ferguson over at the Auburn Observer. This was something that they've done for several years now, and we've taken it over on the Georgia side of things. So for anyone who is watching or listening to this who has not seen one of these drafts before, we will each draft 7 players. None of us are drafting quarterbacks. They're off the board. It's just so easy to get either the starter or the backup, and you pretty much have built the team and built a winning team with that. So everyone will take 1 running back, 1 wide receiver, 1 tight end, 1 offensive lineman, 2 members of the front 7, and 1 defensive back. And I'll point out too that this is not the entire roster that's available. Anyone who started last year, they are not available. And there's a few other guys that contributed enough where I think it wouldn't be really fair to define them as a spring breakout. London Humphreys did not technically have a start last year. Don't think that's really fair for anybody to get him. Took Zayden Walker off the board because I think he played enough. The 2 tight ends, Ethan Barbour and Elias Williams, they are not available. So if you listen to this entire podcast and you go, there's no way none of these guys drafted X or whoever, more than likely they were not available. So just keep that in mind, because we're really putting our knowledge of this roster to the test and really trying to see if we can come up with something special to get us going with spring practice less than a week away. Before we get into the order, before we get into the actual picks, I want to check in with both of you guys. I'll start with you, Ben. Just how are you feeling before we start this draft, and just what are your thoughts before we jump into it?
Well, I feel good about my board and the guys that I think that I want to get on my team, and then you sort of threw me a curveball right before we launched this thing. So now, if you want to know where my thoughts are at, I think everyone's going to find out here in a second where my thoughts are at as I still try and figure out what I'm going to do here.
Kipp, what about you? How are you feeling?
I'm just waiting to see, how Ben screws this up and allows me to kind of take this thing over. But you know what? I'm excited for my future picks, and obviously getting selected to my team puts you in a great situation. And I know a lot of guys are hoping to get selected by me so that they can fulfill their breakout potential. But honestly, it looks like with how Georgia's roster set up, it's like this feels just like an all breakout. Like you can make an all breakout 2 deep. So for me, I think there's a lot of depth in this draft. So, like I said, I'm just interested in seeing what Ben does.
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good. I didn't do a ton of prep right before we started recording, but I did make a draft board, and a much deeper draft board for myself than I've done in past drafts. But then when you get in the middle of it, especially if you're the one, I'm usually trying to take notes on everybody's team. I'm trying to mark off, who is no longer available. Sometimes you come back up on the clock and you're like, yeah, I'll take that guy. And then you kind of look at the team later and you're like, But I'm feeling pretty good, and I think more than anything, this is going to be a fun episode. I always enjoy this. Enjoy getting people to vote, not only once the teams are made, but then after spring. And then it's like, all right, well, let's say we thought Ben's team from this right after the draft was by far the best. We could get to the end of spring ball and be like, actually, it was Kipp's team, that wound up winning. I always like kind of circling back. So Ben teased this. So we just did a random number generator to not set the order, but to set what order you pick in. And Ben got number 1. So Ben can pick which of the 3 spots he takes. And then I was next, and then Kipp. So, Ben, you've had a few minutes at least to think about where you want to go in this draft. What pick order are you taking? I will also say we are going in a snake order. So if he took the 3rd pick, he would have the 4th pick, the 1st pick of the 2nd round.
So the debate I'm having here is that I have one specific player that I want on my team.
But I don't just tell us.
But I don't think he's going to make it to later in the first, but I also see the value in having 2 of the top 4 picks. So I am going to take the 3rd position in the first round, 1st position in the second round. Let you guys make a couple of decisions for me to start out the draft, and then I think I'll be able to go from there.
All right. I honestly, if I were you, Ben, I would have done the same thing. I think the turn is the most valuable spot. It sucks when it starts because you'll probably watch 2 guys you really wanted, but I think it's better off when you're building your team. Kipp, I'm going to take the 2nd pick because I want to be in the middle. So Kipp, by default, gets the number 1 pick. Man, how before we get it going, and we will get it going if you're watching and listening to this. This is not going to be us just beating around the bush for 45 minutes. First pick, how you feeling?
I mean, heavy is the crown. Like, it's just like, I mean, I get it, guys. Like, age before beauty, I guess, is what you guys are supposed to say here. But sure. I mean, I've been here before. I really don't want to think about the times I've picked number 1 in the past. Let's just forget some of those picks. But yeah, I learned a lot from the previous drafts. And yeah, I think I'm ready to go ahead and knock this out. You guys have kind of confirmed, like, I know which guy won't be there when I pick again, so I might as well just take that player. So why not? Let's do it.
All right, let's get the ball rolling. Kipp, with the first overall pick, where are you going?
I'm going Talon Taylor.
Yeah.
Like, again, there's a lot of guys that are kind of similar on the board for me. Specific positions, I look at guys that, probably stepping into big roles. And there are, even at this position, there's a couple guys there that should have much bigger roles than they have had before. For me, I'm just looking at a guy that I just think that, again, if you're talking about breakout, I think he's just poised to do that in the biggest way of all the players available for us to pick here. I mean, again, like I said in the previous show, the wide receiver room has been thinned out. And so several players are going to be asked to step into the starting lineup. I think he's going to be one of those guys. He's got elite speed. He's obviously shown flashes. I think everything sets up well for him to just emerge as one of the leading options for Georgia. Other teams, even after, the limited stats he had in his first season, like other programs were hoping that he looked around. Like, he was coveted during I'm not going to say tampering, but their programs wanted him on their roster after last season. He chose to come back because he knew the opportunity he had at Georgia. I just look at that play speed and I'm thinking about, this is what Georgia needed last season, still needs. You remember Arian Smith, the fact that he led the team in targets. Like, Talon Taylor is the vertical threat on this team, in my opinion, just based on his overall skill set, his route running. He could play all 3 wide receiver positions. I think Georgia's going to find a lot of ways to get him the ball, and I just think that this spring is going to be where he really finds his comfort level with Gunnar Stockton.
I think that that's a really good pick from Kipp. I got to give Kipp credit. I thought his explanation on Tuesday's podcast, when we were talking about a Bulldog with the most to gain, I thought he made a really compelling case with his pick of Talon Taylor, and I do think he's got a big opportunity. And I'll make my pick in a second, but I will say Talon was the number 1 player on my board.
Same.
And Ben, I was going to ask Ben, same for you?
Yeah, I mean, my debate that I was having was, do I see the value in 2 of the top 4 picks or taking Talon Taylor number 1 overall? I knew he wasn't going to make it to number 3, so I kind of was making the conscious decision to not have him, which does hurt me now. We're in the moment of the draft where I can only regret my decision. I won't be able to not regret it until I actually get to start making some picks. But yeah, it was the right pick by Kipp, no doubt.
All right, I'm next up, and I'm going to go with my front 7, and I'm going to go with a true freshman, and I'm going to go with the highest-rated signee in Georgia's 2026 class, Valden Sohn. I think that he's a guy with what he was rated, with the excitement. And I got to say this too, Ben, just to be honest, Joseph Jonah Ajonye deserves a huge assist in this pick because he was raving about Valden and what he is capable of, and I think you look to last year, I think about, Elijah Griffin, the way he came on as a true freshman defensive lineman. There was excitement early on about his potential and what he was able to do during the spring. I do think there's going to be a learning curve. I think this is still a guy that, his best ball is probably still a good ways ahead of him, but just a freak athlete, a guy that we know, when we get to this time of year, when we start talking about true freshmen and we talk about, the big question is who has a chance to legitimately contribute. Defensive line is one of the places you have to look if you're Georgia because they rotate a lot of guys in. Baldwin might not start a game this season, but that doesn't mean he may not, that does not mean he won't play a ton. I think he's going to rotate in quite a bit. I'm excited about Valden. I think he's got a bright future ahead. So I'm going there, true freshman defensive lineman with my first pick.
I like that pick. I mean, look, he was the 1 5-star that Georgia signed in the last recruiting class. It was very clear that Georgia prioritized him as the defensive lineman that they wanted in the cycle. And to your point, the way Joseph Jonah Ajonye talked about him and a couple other guys might have changed the way that I'm viewing them going into spring as well.
All right, Ben, you are up. And if you'll just take it one at a time, start with the third and final pick of the first round.
I don't know why I chose third, as if I had some plan that I was going to go to attack my board here now, but the way that you all have done it, look, here's Georgia went into the transfer portal to get this guy. The number one problem that Georgia had the last 2 years, really, maybe even longer than that, you could say, is getting after the quarterback. And I think there are some questions about elements of Amaris Williams' game, but I think one thing that is for certain is that he has the natural pass rushing ability that Georgia has lacked over the last couple of years. I think that he is, out of everybody that Georgia has on its roster, is the most likely to be that sack total guy if you're trying to find that. He has done it in the SEC, maybe not to the snap count he would have expected at Auburn as a true freshman, but enough for me to say Georgia really only went and got one guy in that respect out of the transfer portal to solve that problem, and it was Amaris Williams. And so I think that if Georgia is going to improve getting after the quarterback in 2026, he's going to be one of the guys that they're leaning on to be able to do that.
I feel like we have a pretty good consensus, at least with my draft board. The three guys that went in the first round, those were all my top three guys. And I think that Amaris, with his potential, with what he showed and the flashes at Auburn, I think that's a great pick. Before we get to Ben's next pick, Kipp, has this gone at least so far the way you kind of expected?
Yeah, the number 2 and number 5 guys on my board have been selected. So I think overall, like, you can't be surprised by that at all with Amaris. I think he fits exactly what Georgia's looking for at that position, at its edge defensive end position. And I think, he's got that disruptive upside. So I just think as far as just plugging in a guy and seeing him, technically break out, like, I think there's kind of a built-in boost that no matter whatever their presence is as a transfer, it's a breakout. So you get kind of that bonus. So I think it's a little bit of, you get a little bit of both with Amaris Williams. He's got the high upside, a big time recruit, and a guy that, again, that's was Georgia's number one roster hole during the season that we all pointed out, and eventually Kirby Smart pointed it out too.
All right, Ben, we start the second round. You've got your second pick. Where are you going?
Well, there's a couple plays I'm going to let you decide. I have 2 receivers that I want. Kipp's already taken one. I'm going to let you decide for me, Jordan, who my other receiver is. So I'm not going to be taking receiver now. You're going to get – I'm not tipping tipping what I'm going to be doing the rest of this draft. Like, you'll be picking a receiver before me as far as I'm concerned. I almost was going to do something kind of crazy here, but I'm actually going to sort of take the lazy way out with what I just did with Amaris Williams. Georgia went to the safety market 2 years ago and got a couple of different safeties. Not the hit rate wasn't what they would have liked to be. I think Georgia learned some lessons there. And I think in particular, Jamarly Riddle out of ECU is a guy that they identified as the person they think best suited to line up next to KJ Bolden. I think that that's going to prove itself throughout this spring, and I think that he will be the guy that Georgia will be relying on mostly next to KJ Bolden in the 2026 season, and I think this spring is where that is going to play itself out.
Yep, I got to give it to you, Ben. That was going to be my next pick, so that you made the right decision there. I think Jamarly Riddle is going to be a starter for Georgia this year, and I do think that's going to be a real competition there at safety to start opposite of KJ. But Kipp hit on it a few minutes ago. You get a transfer, you kind of come in with the expectation that most of these guys are expected to play big roles or at least be in the competition for a starting role. So I really like that pick, although it did screw up my plan. So congratulations.
I hate to be the guy that I cover high school recruiting 99% of my time. And I hate to be the guy that just took 2 transfers as my first 2 breakout picks. But, I would have taken Talon number 1. I would have strongly considered Valdensohn number 2 as well. And so you guys, as was the case when I was deciding where I was going to be picking, you guys kind of made my choices for me.
The spin you need to take, Ben, is the gems that you can get later in the draft. You're going to get the high school guys that we just don't know about.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, with my next pick, I'm going to go with the guy I talked about on Tuesday, and that's offensive tackle Kene Agboko. I'm going to make him, I believe that's the first offensive lineman off the board, and I just think he's a guy with a ton of potential because, again, he got there during bowl prep. He was a guy, from what I've heard, people were really excited about, even though I think he was kind of dealing with an injury at that point. Wasn't quite 100%, but one of the big question marks for me with this 2026 Georgia football team is offensive tackle. You've got Ernest Greenback, which is huge, but Ernest has struggled with injuries, and he's a guy that has had a lingering back injury that goes back to his freshman year, and it affected him at times in 2025. We expect Juan Gaston would be the guy starting at the other tackle spot, but I think there's an opportunity for another tackle to get in the mix, whether that's being the swing tackle between those 2 spots, whether it's maybe pushing Juan Gaston for that starting job. And I see Kene Agboko as that guy. I think he's got a ton of potential. I think he's a guy that, I think about Ben talking about covering his recruitment and, having him standing next to his brother Nnamdi Agboko, who's a defensive tackle for Georgia, and kind of making Big Brother look kind of small there. I think the world of Kene's potential, so I'm taking him off the board. Going with the 2 true freshmen to start my draft, and got a Kene Agboko there.
I like that pick. I mean, anytime that there's a true freshman that we're realistically talking about having a chance to be starting on the offensive line, it's hard not to have that conversation.
All right, Kipp, you've got 2 picks in a row, and just like with Ben, if you will just take them one at a time, give us your first pick, the pick that will end the second round.
Man, I did not expect. Okay. First, I am going to go a little off the board, I think. I'm just going to take a chance. I just felt like, you know what? You guys seem to be, have unique boards, a little bit different than mine. I have this guy high up on the board, not because I think he's going to emerge from the spring as a starter, but because I just think he's just going to come in and turn so many heads. We're not going to have a choice but to talk about him because I've heard since he's got there that he's just been turning heads left and right. I'm taking tight end Caden Prothro.
Yeah.
It's just, again, they've got dudes in that room. We talk about it every year. We know Lawson Lucky's coming back. He's entrenched as a starter there. You mentioned Elias Williams, Jaden Riddell. They got guys in big roles who've played a lot of snaps. Ethan Barber. There's a lot of guys in that room, but this guy, for me, he's, in my opinion, kind of one of the biggest wins overall of the class, but the biggest win offensively, in my opinion, because I'm not worried about whether he's a tight end or not. He's just a guy that they're just gonna put on the field wherever. And I just mentioned they need help catching passes, and he's a freak. I just think he's gonna be a hybrid mismatch no matter what. And during the spring, I just think that's where like he's just going to cause issues. He's going to test them in coverage immediately. And you know, whoever's playing star or whoever's matched up with him, I think he's going to challenge guys in coverage on a regular basis. And again, I just think that no matter how loaded that room is, I just think he's going to stand out and going to be one of those freshmen that we're talking about as good luck not having him on the field this fall. So that's my pick to where, you know, he might not be a guy where I'm picking in the fall draft, but I think for spring breakout and this turning a lot of heads, it's going to be hard for Caden Prothro not to be near the top of the list.
I think the thing for me with Caden, Kipp kind of highlighted there. I mean, they see him as an offensive weapon, line him up out wide, put him at tight end. I think that gives him more opportunities to make big plays. For us to come out of, say, the second scrimmage and it'd be like, yeah, you know, Caden had a really productive day. So tight end, really for me, and Ben, before we get to Kipp's next pick, I'll get your opinion on this. Tight end and running back in this draft, it just doesn't seem like there's a ton of options, especially because there are guys I had taken off the board. Caden Prothro, I thought, was probably the first of that group to come off the board, and I'm kind of interested to see what the run after that looks like.
I was considering taking him over Riddle when I was having my debate right before I took my second pick. I wasn't, you know, I didn't know. The thing about it is for me at tight end is like there's a few guys that I feel good about having good springs, but to Kipp's point, a guy that's 6'7", like Georgia's not going to be asking him to do the full Jordan. I hope nobody was watching on YouTube for your little stunt that you just pulled right there. Kipp's probably too old to even realize what you just did.
I'm not offline. I don't have the benefit of being offline, but I ignore these things.
Yeah, no, I should. I'm around too many high schoolers. Caden, they're not going to ask him to do it too much. They're going to put him in matchup situations that I think is going to make him look like such a weapon this spring. So I think that maybe more than some other tight ends, he's going to have the ability to break out in spring, so to speak, because he's going to just have some pop moments, even if he's not necessarily the tight end that will be best suited to get the most snaps out of some of those guys in the fall, though he might end up being that too. So yeah, I think it's a great pick from Kipp.
I was going to say this, Ben, since, you know, you were kind of on the fence about, you know, the Jamarly Riddle pick and wanting Caden Prothro. I mean, you could do like the Baltimore Ravens. You could just undo it. You want to hit that button?
Yeah, that's right. I'll opt out of my my draft pick of Jamarly Riddle. No, I still like the Riddle pick, and I do think that he's going to have a big spring.
All right, Kipp, we are starting the third round now, and you've got a pick. Where are you going with this one?
I mean, I made a decision while we were talking about Caden Prothro to just, I mean, why not? I'm just going to finish it. Like, I'm taking Dante Dowdell and basically finishing my skill positions on offense. I think it's interesting because I could make the case for two different running backs to have kind of a similar role this spring. My opinion is that I don't think RB2 is locked up at all. Like, again, Chauncey Bowens came in when they needed him to last season and, you know, led them in rushing in several games, had big games. And again, really good player. I think that it's going to be three guys battling for that position. And even last year, we talked about, like, we don't know who RB2 is going to be. And it turned out like for a while, we didn't know who, you know, the starting running back was going to be. But I think that what Chauncey Bowens did last season earned him maybe, you know, day one, a lead in that area. But I think between Bo Walker and Dowdell, like, those are just guys that are going to push him in practice. And with Dowdell, like, he's done what Chauncey's done multiple times and for, you know, pretty bad teams. And so I just think that you can't look at what Georgia did last season with Josh McCray and go, oh, well, Dowdell's 6'2", 228. He's just going to be the same guy. You look at the film, you're like, well, this guy's actually explosive for his size. Like maybe we're thinking more toward the Kendall Milton side, like just a guy that does have some pop, can get downhill. I think, we're actually this offseason, maybe he hasn't been talked about enough. I think he's going to really just, have a breakout spring. And he's going to have a unique role, like we said, with Josh McCray, because between Roderick Robinson and McCray, like Georgia uses a big back, but it's not going to be the way that they use Josh McCray, which a lot of people, got a little frustrated with. It's not going to be just a short yardage guy, but he is the only bruiser in that room. And they do like to use those guys. So I just think the fact that he's got impressive film already in SEC play, you're not going to be able to keep him off the field. And I think they're not going to be able to, not talk about him as being a guy that pushes for RB2 and probably has a leg up on RB2 by the end of the spring. I think that's what I'm projecting. He's going to have a big role. And like we said, he's a transfer. So he's immediately going to, be a breakout performer in that sense. But I just think that that's a guy that people are going to go, wow, like that was a big transfer portal win for Georgia when all is said and done.
When I went through and watched the film of all the transfers they got, I thought that Dante Dowdell was the most underrated. I really liked what he showed at Kentucky. I think he's got a ton of potential, and you need to acknowledge what it is. This dude's a mercenary. I mean, he was at Kentucky, he was at Nebraska, he was at Oregon. He's coming in, and he's got a job to do, and I think he's got a chance to play quite a bit. I think he's a really good back in pass protection. He's got decent hands, but they didn't throw to him a ton at Kentucky last year. And I'll say this before I make my pick. I had taken notes. A few minutes ago I talked about running back and tight end were the two positions, that I thought not a ton of depth. You needed to be very strategic with. I had written in my notes, when Caden Prothro goes off the board, get a tight end. And I also wrote, when Dante Dowdell goes off the board, get a running back. So I'm picking one of those two positions in a second. But, Ben, I don't know if you have thoughts on Dante Dowdell, but I think he's got it. I'm with Kipp. I think he could wind up being that number two back as much as I like Chauncey Bowens. But Dante's got kind of that power, and I think he gives you kind of a different element if he is able to win that job.
Well, I like the pick. Kipp has a great draft going so far. I got to admit, I hate to admit it, but I will also say, Jordan, I think based on what you just teased, I think you're going to actually like where I'm going to be going, because I think you and I have sort of diverged in how we're viewing the board at this point. So I think you're probably going to be a happy man when I make my two picks as well, based on what you just alluded to.
Well, I'll go ahead and make my next pick, and I'm going tight end, and I'm going to get Lincoln Keys. I think if you get one of Caden Prothro and Lincoln Keys, I think you should be feeling pretty good going in. And just the depth in this room is just stupid. You lost Oscar Delp, and you go add Caden Prothro, Lincoln Keys, and Braden Fogel. And to have Elias Williams, Ethan Barbour back for another year, really like that room. I'm also kind of learning, Ben, that I think I just really like picking guys that come on the Stay Woke QJ recruiting show, because I got Valden and Lincoln. But no, I think he's a guy that with that much tight end talent, I think it's kind of easy to forget about Lincoln Keys. But he was a guy that was committed to Georgia for quite a while. I really like his upside, and people may be going into spring really focused on Caden Prothro. I think Lincoln Keys has the potential to make some noise.
100%. In fact, one of the reasons I didn't end up taking Caden in that with my second pick was because, I know, looking at that recruiting class when it was unfolding and Georgia thought that they were maybe going to be getting Mark Bowman, that Lincoln Keys was the one guy who had the spot. And Todd Hartley said as much to me when we had our conversation at the Sugar Bowl Media Day. And so, Caden Prothro being kind of a unicorn, I think, is what makes him such a great spring breakout option. But I also know how Georgia views Lincoln Keys and how important he was to what they were building in the last recruiting cycle. And so I didn't choose Caden Prothro because I didn't want to choose Caden Prothro over Lincoln Keys. And all it really did was just lead me to having neither of them. But you all have now decided who my tight end is going to be, so I don't have to rush into that. I can take my time figuring out what I want to do at other positions.
Ben always, I think, was ahead of the curve with these drafts of saying, all right, you guys have taken these positions and I'm just going to wait till the end, which makes sense because you got to be strategic because we're fighting for other positions still on the board. All right, Ben, you have the next pick in the third round. And again, you will have the pick after that. But start with that first one. Let's close out the third round.
Well, I said when I was making my second pick, I almost did something crazy. I was considering Caden Prothrow. I ended up taking Jamarly Riddle, but I almost did something real crazy right off the jump. And I'm actually now going to get the guy that I wanted with that second pick now with my third pick. And I mentioned everything that I said about Amaris Williams and how important it is for Georgia to improve in pass rush. And I think the guy that Georgia recruited out of high school that over the last year has proven to be the guy with the most upside when it comes to getting after the quarterback. And this might be an unconventional pick. I don't even know where he will be on y'all's board, but I am taking Chase Linton out of North Atlanta High School going into his second year. He showed some serious flashes last year. And I know that we didn't always get to see it on Saturdays, but just in talking to folks behind the scenes, this was a guy that popped that I think by the time they got to the SEC championship game and then into that college football playoff game against Ole Miss, he was a guy that everyone kept saying, like, he's going to get some more run. He's going to get some more run. I think he maybe ended up playing around 10 snaps in that Sugar Bowl against Ole Miss. And I think they would have liked to, not be playing from behind in parts of that second half where he would have maybe gotten even more snaps in if they had been, ahead in that fourth quarter. But I just think he is the most ready. And look, it was a good class with Isaiah Gibson and Darren Akinnigbon that were signing with him. And he was the third ranked guy out of that group, but he was still a top 50 prospect in the 24/7 sports rankings. And I think that his ability to get after the quarterback was why I think he's poised to have a really big season. And I know it might be weird because I just went and took Amaris Williams, who they theoretically recruited over the top of some of these guys out of the transfer portal. I think Chase Linton is wired in a way they are going to have to get him on the field this season. And I think spring will be his chance to prove that.
Yeah, I don't think that's a crazy pick. I do think that you made a good call waiting an extra round, but he was with who is still left on the board, he was my second name of the list of guys that I was still considering. I mean, to me, what spoke volumes was him getting run in the Sugar Bowl. And, I didn't think he played great, but again, he's still a true freshman. They threw him in a playoff game. So I think really highly of Chase Linton and just that outside linebacker room as a whole. Just fascinated to see what we hear over the course of spring, particularly because now Larry Knight is coaching that room. They're going to have a new position coach there. All right, we're going to do one more round before we take a quick break. But, Ben, you are back up now with the second of back-to-back picks. Where are you going with this one?
So we all know who I'm going to be taking at tight end already. So we won't make it, I won't take that right now, and I'll just do that whenever the time comes. I've already, as a man of my word, I said I was going to let you take wide receiver before me and make that decision for me. But there's two guys. I mean, the problem is there's two guys that I want to take at receiver, and I don't want to make the decision. So I'm just going to make you make that decision for me. Problem is, I kind of feel the same way now about offensive line and running back where I have it. I'm going to go. I don't think I correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think either of you two guys are going to have had this guy very high on your board, but I'm doing it anyway. I don't think we're going to see a ton of Drew Bobo this spring. I don't know what the official status is on his injury update and where things are at. But I think that we saw Malachi Tolliver got the run in the SEC championship game and in the college football playoff. I think a lot of that was because he had been around longer and he had been in the program a little bit longer. But the guy that was behind him that I thought was maybe going to have a chance to start in those games was Cortez Smith. And I think that I know some people here are probably going to have Zyke Helton on their board, especially after the way that Joseph Jonah Ajonye talked about him, and he was certainly on my board. But I think that Georgia made a decision in December to play Malachi Tolliver over Cortez Smith because he'd been around longer. And I think that Cortez Smith will probably receive a little bit of that favoritism over Zyke Helton for the same reasons this spring. And I think because there's not going to be Drew Bobo snaps to go around for much of the spring, at least based on what we've been hearing heading into it. I think it's going to be an opportunity for Cortez Smith to leap ahead of Malachi Tolliver in that regard. Now, sort of like Kipp was talking about with Caden Prothro, is that going to translate to snaps in the fall? Probably not, because if Drew Bobo is healthy come fall, theoretically, he was going to take all of those center snaps. And so you're not really going to see many snaps during the season for Cortez Smith. But I just think that this spring is his chance to assert himself as center 2. But I think that he will be in a deep competition with Malachi Tolliver and probably with Zyke Helton as well to determine who that is that would be next man up behind Drew Bobo if he were to suffer an injury again during the season.
I had Cortez on my board. Now I'll say this: as we've gone, as I've made picks, once I got a Kenne, I just took off all my offensive linemen, so I don't remember how high, but I did have him on there because I think highly of him. I thought he played really well. Again, they were playing Charlotte, and the game was a blowout. I really liked what Cortez showed, and then he got hurt. And I don't think it was a significant enough injury that that's the reason Malachi played instead of Cortez, but he did get banged up in that game. I really like that pick, and I think that both of you have done a very good job of pointing out and differentiating the spring draft and the fall camp draft are very different. The fall camp is like, this guy's playing, and we need to be ready to see him a lot. Spring, there's so much that can change, even over the course of summer. And, we're not expecting a ton of summer enrollees this time, but I always bring up that, as good as spring was for some guys last year, Dontrell Glover came in and wasn't even part of spring and wound up starting. So before I go to my pick, Kipp, did you have thoughts on Cortez? Was he someone you were interested in at all?
I had pretty similar spots for, I guess, the top 3 offensive linemen, because it's kind of similar to where they're not like just sliding in as starters, but we could see any of these 3 guys earning a starting role. I think he was a guy that, we thought would be that backup center before he got banged up. So we already know how highly thought of he is by the coaching staff. So I just think this is one of those positions where I think Drew Bobo's injury kind of helps Georgia in that they know what he brings to the table, and they're going to be able to learn a lot about what else they have at that position. And that open competition is going to be just, really fascinating. We're going to know a lot more about these centers by the end of spring. So I think it makes a lot of sense just because we've only heard good things, and he figures to probably push for a lot of, he's going to get a lot of snaps in the spring. So maybe he's the backup center by the time we're doing our, our fall camp draft. So that for me, that makes sense as a breakout performer.
All right, I am up next, and I am going to pick a receiver, and I'm going to go ahead and say I've written the name down. So, I will not change my pick. But, Ben, I want to see who you think I'm going to pick. Scout's honor.
I don't know if I can trust you, Jordan. I don't know if I can trust you.
I promise. I've made the pick. It's written.
Write it down on a piece of paper right now. It's the only way.
I've got it written, and I'll put it
I think you're going to take Isaiah Canyon.
Incorrect. I'm going to take Craig Dandridge.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, my gosh.
That's not who. So who were you thinking the
receivers were? Now you've put me in a spot where
now he still has to make a pick between,
I'm going to have to decide between the 2 guys. And look, I had Craig on my board. I love Craig. I think he's going to have a great season. I think that he is really that guy. So I don't think it's a bad pick. I just didn't have him as my final 2. And now I don't know you actually made this worse for me by doing that, even though I didn't have him as someone I was considering picking.
Well, let me talk about Craig Dandridge. He's somebody I'm buying all the stock. I think that he's a guy, when you look at slot receiver, I think right now you would look at Sokovie White-Helton as the favorite, but I'm not counting out Craig Dandridge. I think he's got a ton of potential. I keep thinking about some of the plays that Ben saw and videoed of him at Cambridge. He was just incredible there and did such a great job. And there was a lot of buzz about him during bowl prep and getting ready for the Sugar Bowl against Ole Miss. So I don't feel comfortable about slot. I feel like we just saw Sokovie White-Helton so few times last year that I can't sit here and just say, yep, Sokovi's the starter. Don't think twice about it. He did play a little bit in the Sugar Bowl, so that was a good sign. But yeah, I'm going with another true freshman. I'm going with Craig Dandridge, and I'm just giddy. I've continued to mess with Ben's draft. That makes me very happy.
Now I don't know what I'm gonna do. Now I want to take 2 pass catchers, not a tight end. I mean, you've created a world of hurt for me here.
All right, so Kipp has back-to-back picks. Kipp, you're just going to make one, and then we'll have a quick break and come back and take this. We'll go ahead.
You've also made it so that I think we're going to have at least one egregious snub at wide receiver. Like, I don't know what to do here now. All right, I'm sorry.
No, I love it. This is what the whole podcast is for. We need people being like, you guys really didn't take this guy, but that's part of it. Yeah, of course we don't know what we're doing. Kipp, you are up, so just give us the first of these 2 picks.
All right. I'm going to go with Khalil Barnes. I think, again, you mentioned Jamarlee Riddle. Sure. I mean, it seems like he's probably going to be in a good shape to get a starting spot. But at the same time, I think where Khalil Barnes comes in is the versatility. Like, they're going to play him all over the place. I think like he's going to compete for that starting safety spot with Riddle. And I mean, honestly, the guy that probably been slept on a lot all offseason. The fact that Zion Branch stayed, kind of a big deal. Your second season at Georgia, you've now acclimated. We've seen DBs do this before where they come in, and it's like, oh, this is different here. And then year 2, they actually perform at a very high level. And so I think that has to be considered. But I think you bring in a guy like Barnes who can cover, who can play, he's going to get looks at the star position, played a lot at Clemson. Their system asks a lot of their DBs. So I think coming into a data-heavy scheme at Georgia is still going to, he's going to acclimate really well. I think he could play deep middle for Georgia. They're going to love that about him. And then, you think about the star position, how Rashawn Dinkins kind of took that over at the end of the year. I think he's going to get pushed there too. And so nickel, star, safety position, they're going to use them all over the field. And so I just think that, again, he's going to be playing a lot of snaps, a lot of different roles. And, finding like – maybe he plays all of them. Maybe he sticks at one. But I think overall, the upside there, knowing that only one or really 2 positions in the secondary are really locked down with Ellis Robinson and KJ Bolden. I just think with his experience and still upside, because he's played at a high level as a freshman, I think he's going to have a big-time spring for Georgia.
Yeah, I really like Khalil Barnes. I think he's a guy that they brought in with, the intention that he's going to have a chance to start, whether that's at safety, whether that's competing at star. And that's one of the fun things going into a new year. Georgia loves versatile defensive backs, which means some of these guys could move. I mean, even Rashawn Dinkins, as well as I thought he played at star, maybe he gets some run at safety. So Khalil Barnes, I think, is a really smart pick. He's going to be in the mix. He's going to be a guy that gets a lot of buzz. And, man, the whole offseason, big hometown vibes, getting guys like Khalil Barnes from North Oconee. And he is one of several new guys that they have added. So we have got 4 rounds in the books. We're going to take a break and then come back and do the final 3 rounds. Want to make sure and encourage you. If you're watching, if you are listening to this and you enjoy this, come join us over there on the Junkyard, Dawgs247.com. Sign up. We've still got the 50% off sale, 50% off for a year-long annual membership. Again, great time of year to join. Spring practice less than a week away. Georgia basketball getting ready for the NCAA tournament. I'll be there along for that ride. Really excited to follow that. Olivia Sayre covers baseball for us. Georgia baseball getting ready for the start of SEC play. Fantastic time to join us on the Junkyard, and we hope you guys will do so. So we'll take a quick break and be right back and then finish this draft. back to start the 5th round of the draft, and Kipp is still on the board. So, Kipp, you're on the clock. Where are you going with your 5th pick?
Well, okay, so I'm kind of locked into just a couple of positions now, so I can kind of take my time with one and pick the other one apart. And I'm in a similar situation as you've been, where you can let the other guy make the decision for you, and I'm going to do that. Yeah, I feel pretty good about this. I'm going to take Joshua Horton because I think he started flashing. Like whenever he's on the field, you're like, he's pretty disruptive. And you look at the fact that, again, they're replacing Christian Miller's snaps. I mean, he was starting to get double-digit snaps there down, towards the end of the season. And when he played, he looked really good. And so I just think this spring, as his third year in the program, the second year in the program, third year, I think he's set up for that breakout spring, but also just emerging as a major role. He's had some big moments already for them, getting quarterback pressures at a position where they're just, yearning for it. They're like, can we just get someone to impact the quarterback from our defensive front? And, you kind of saw it at times with Christian Miller. They asked him to do a lot. Jordan Hall banged up. It was just, I just think that, you don't really have a guy that you can depend on to be the one that, maybe not takes on double teams, but makes opponents, put more than one guy on him. Like, is Xavier McLeod, what's his role going to be? Obviously, Elijah Griffin, very powerful. He's going to have a big role. But I just think after those guys, I think Horton's the next man up. And I just think, again, year 2 at Georgia as a transfer, as I said before, that's kind of when you see guys, the light comes on and they take that next step in their development now that they know what to expect.
Ben, I don't know how you felt about Josh Horton, but when they added him, and I think that was, if I'm remembering right, was that after spring practice last year? Am I remembering that right?
I think you might be
because I think if I'm remembering right, I think it was Elo, Josh Horton, and Josh McCray all like on that one night. And I say that to say he was a guy I didn't really expect really to see at all. I thought it was kind of more of a depth piece. I thought it was a guy like, hey, let's add this guy. I think he played at Langston Hughes. Let's get an in-state guy and see if we can develop him. And he played and made some pretty significant contributions. I think it was in the Ole Miss game during the regular season that he had a big pass deflection and made some plays and I thought made true progress over his first year at Georgia. So I think it's a savvy pick. I feel like a lot of the times when we do these drafts, Kipp does a really good job of kind of finding that vet that has a chance to maybe play a bigger role. And I think Josh Horton has that potential. And I think that Josh Horton might be a guy that we're talking about a good bit during spring.
Totally agree. He played so much more than I was expecting him to last year. And I think that's why, like, seeing him take even another jump this spring, and to your point, if we're remembering correctly, and he wasn't even with Georgia last spring, like the fact that this will be able to be his first spring in Athens, that alone will probably allow him to take a big step forward. Someone that I probably undervalued on my own board as I was going through this, and as we're doing it now in retrospect, someone that I probably would have had a little bit higher up if I still had some front seven guys that I needed to take.
All right, I am back on the board, and I'm going to go with another 5-star, and I'm going to go to the front 7, and I'm getting Isaiah Gibson. There was so much concern about him last year, the fact he did not factor in to Georgia's plans. Kirby Smart was really complimentary of him toward the end of the season. Even talking to Isaiah at the Sugar Bowl, I was just struck by how mature he was. I was struck by him being like, look, this is where I want to be, and I know that I got to get better, and I'm going to attack it, and I'm going to try to get better. And honestly, I believe in Isaiah's pass rush ability, the fact that he could factor into Georgia's plans. But I think bigger than anything, you've got a new face in that room. And that's not to criticize Chidera Uzodiribe at all, but you got someone who has no relation, with any of the guys in there. It's basically a blank slate. And so Larry Knight's coming in there, and he's going to see who's the best of the best. And I want to shout out to Marcus Hendricks, who played for Larry at Arkansas State. I interviewed him for the story I did, and one of the points he made to me was he does not care how old you are. He doesn't care about recruiting status. He's going to play the best players. And so I think Isaiah can fit that mold. It's going to be tough because, even just within his signing class with Chase Linton and also Darren Akinnigbon, I think all three of those guys are really talented. But I'm betting on the upside of Isaiah Gibson. I think he's a guy you're going to see take a step forward in his second year. So I'm taking him. That is my last of my front seven picks, going with Isaiah Gibson.
Jordan, you're doing a terrible job of making decisions for me that I thought you were going to make. I was convinced that you would have picked a running back in one of the two picks between the time that I picked last. So not only do I now have to make a decision, an impossible decision between two receivers, and now I guess I'm going to kind of have to make the decision for you at running back, which I was not hoping to do. So thanks a lot for that.
Yeah, I'm a giver. What can I say? All right, Ben, so you got back-to-back picks. Make this first pick, and then before we start that sixth round, we're going to kind of just go through what everybody still needs.
Sure.
So let's close out this fifth round. Who are you going with?
So I am really torn on what I wanted to do at running back. I was hoping that you were going to pick one of the two guys that I had on the board to make the decision for me, but because nobody else needs to take a tight end and nobody else needs to take a wide receiver, I feel almost obligated to take the running back here just for the, in the spirit of the draft, like not just letting you make all my decisions for me. I don't know what I'm going to do here. I am going to take, and I think I've probably taken this guy in the past in breakout drafts, and even last season, I just felt like he was going to break out, and he just literally and figuratively, and he just never quite did. But I'm going to go with the guy with the most speed on the team, and that's Dwight Phillips Jr. I don't know who you're going to take because there are technically other running backs that you can take, but I was really debating between him and a guy that I thought showed the best field vision of any of the running backs last season in Bo Walker. And so the fact you made me make that decision, I'm just not thrilled with you right now. But all last season, we kept saying like Dwight Phillips feels like he's an eyelash away from just busting a big run. He just never could quite get into open space in the way that I feel like many of us would have expected him to be able to. I feel like one more spring, him getting in the weight room in this off season and just adding a little bit more weight that makes him a little bit tougher to bring down. I think we'll hear some stories throughout this spring where Dwight Phillips just got open space and wasn't able to be caught by anybody on Georgia's defense. And so while I'm not thrilled about having to make the running back decision, I am happy to have the guy that is the fastest player on the team on my breakout draft.
Anytime you got an opportunity to draft a guy named Peanut, you got to just do it. But no, I like the pick. It was him and another running back who I think at this point will be the running back I take that I was between. And Dwight's just a guy like this. I think this has to be the year. This is the opportunity to break through and to try to provide big plays and be productive and have a role. I think you saw him make plays in some of those games like Marshall and Austin Peay. But then to me, the big question with him is, can you withstand hits? I feel like he took some big hits, and you could tell it affected the way he played. So I like Dwight a lot. He is definitely the fastest of the running backs. I'm thinking about, I think that might have been last spring when you were trying to get him to talk about who was faster than him. It's a very small list on the Georgia roster. So I think there's a ton of potential with that pick.
All right. I'm going to take the lazy way out here. Oh, no, go ahead.
Yeah, before we do that, we're going to just run down. We got 2 rounds left. So we're going to look at each team and just talk about the positions people still need. I'm going to work my way down through each of the 3 teams. This is not the order these guys were drafted, but this is just the easiest way for me to go through it. So Kipp still needs an offensive lineman, and one member of the front seven, because he's already drafted running back Dante Dowdell, wide receiver Talon Taylor, tight end Caden Prothro, member of the front seven Josh Horton, and defensive back Khalil Barnes. I still need a running back, and I still need a defensive back. I've drafted receiver Craig Dandridge, tight end Lincoln Keys, offensive lineman Akene Ogboko, member of the front seven Valden Sohn, member of the front seven Isaiah Gibson. Ben, who will be the next pick, he still needs a receiver and he still needs a tight end. He's got running back Dwight Phillips Jr., offensive lineman Cortez Smith, member of the front seven Morris Williams, member of the front seven Chase Linton, and defensive back Jamarly Riddle. All right, so we're starting the 6th round, which is the second to last round. Ben, you're still up, so were you going with the second of your 2 consecutive picks?
So I think the biggest question mark now for my draft, at least, is what am I going to do with receiver? For content's sake, I'm not going to take the receiver right here. I'm going to save that for the last pick of the entire draft so that I have as much time as possible to figure out what I'm going to do there. I want it to be said, if Jordan hasn't said it already, that he did not allow me to take Elias Williams or Ethan Barbour here at tight end. And so I'm going to take a guy that's been around longer that I think most of you all probably were expecting me to pick with the last tight end spot, and that's Jaden Riddell. He's probably been on breakout drafts in the past, similar to a lot of what I just said about Dwight Phillips Jr. It's felt like he's been close, and he just hasn't quite, for one reason or another, put it all together perfectly the way that people might have expected. But this is still a physical freak of nature. Like, you see this guy in person and you say, like, there's nobody that's lived in a weight room more than Jaden Riddell over the last 2 to 3 years at Georgia than he has. And so it's a crowded room. I mean, you guys named 2 true freshmen that I think are going to be sensational from the moment they get on campus, in Caden and Lincoln. We already know about Lawson Lucky and what he's done, and then Elias Williams and Ethan Barbour, what they were able to do last year as true freshmen in limited spots. But Jaden Riddell is still hanging around there. If he didn't feel as though he was going to have true opportunity to be successful at Georgia this season, I think this would have been the offseason for him to go into the transfer portal. And so the fact that he didn't do that gives me some optimism that he thinks that there is an opportunity for him to grab onto. Like I said, there's a lot of snaps that are going to go away with Oscar Delp going to the NFL, but there are so many different guys that can take on some of those snaps. It's really hard to say who is going to get the lion's share of them. This spring will determine that a lot. I think that Jaden Riddell, at the very least, will find some kind of role this spring that he'll be able to carve out to carry himself into the fall as well.
You hit on one of the big things for me when it comes to Jaden Riddell. It's the fact that he stayed. I thought that he was a name to pay attention to during the portal, not because I'd heard any intel or anything like that, but we talk about how deep the tight end room is. But clearly he feels like he's got a home at Georgia, and clearly they see something in him. And I think that, he got to play a good bit at times as a blocking tight end, and I think he's still got an ability to contribute, to play a big role. And yeah, I wouldn't count him out just yet. I think he's a really talented tight end, and in a room where it may just be they have to rotate pretty regularly just because of how many different options they have. All right, I am next up, and I'm going to fill my need at running back, and I'm going to go with Bo Walker. I think that Bo didn't play a ton last year, but he's a guy that I think it was as early as spring practice last year was creating buzz. And if it wasn't spring, it was definitely fall camp because of some of the plays he was breaking off and his potential. And that room was just so deep last year, you didn't see him a ton during the regular season. I think it was the Charlotte game that he had a really big game, had 2 or 3 touchdowns. This is sort of his opportunity. And again, it's a pretty experienced room, but you are talking about a room that lost Cash Jones and also lost Josh McCray. So there are some snaps to be had. And we've learned this lesson over and over and over again when you look to the season, that it's very hard to keep backs healthy. So you need as many as you can get. So I think Bo's a guy that I really liked what he did when he played in games. And look, guys, I'm just a sucker for a Georgia running back wearing number 24. I'm a big jersey number believer. Number 24 for Georgia, I think there's just no way he's not going to be a contributor in his sophomore year.
Yeah, you made me. I had to make the decision kind of for you on that one. I was hoping that it had gone the other way because I would have been fine with having him or Dwight Phillips on my team. I mean, I think you mentioned that Charlotte game where he had his breakout performance during the season, and then, he catches some breaks, self-inflicted maybe in some cases. Beyond after that, when it came, he gets the injury, and then he obviously has the off the field situation that probably prevented him from having even more of a role down the stretch than he did. But I don't think you can go wrong with that pick, and I think that Bo Walker is someone that will have success at Georgia this season, no doubt.
Against Charlotte, 48 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns. So I think that's something that he can build on. All right, Kipp, you got back-to-back picks. Let's start with the first one to close out the 6th round. Who are you going with?
Well, there's really no pressure because, at this point I'm taking the last guys in multiple positions. So it's just which order I want to go with, right? I think, I was leaning a certain direction, and I said I was going to let you guys make the pick for me, and that was the defensive front. You did, but then I changed my mind because multiple reasons. I'm going with Nnamdi Ogboko.
I like that pick.
Because, again, he's not going to, tear up the spring as far as, oh, man, he had, 7 sacks. He couldn't be blocked. But we have to point out, Georgia's first sack last season on the defense, it was him. He had Georgia's first sack last season, right? And we all joked about it, but there weren't a lot of sacks after that. Little did we know, that was a rare occurrence for their defensive front. I look at that depth chart, and again, I mentioned it. You're looking at the zero technique. Xavier Cloud, they still kind of bounced him between. Elijah Griffin's going into year 2, at the 3 tech, but they keep bouncing Xavier McLeod between 3 and 0. I think they're going to keep doing that. And with Jordan Hall, it's can he stay healthy? Can he stay on the field? And so I think this spring is where I think Ogboko kind of just maybe takes over and says, you guys, McLeod can go play 3 tech, you can do whatever, but I'm locking this nose tackle position down. And that's kind of where my head at. Plus, I have to – he announced he was re-signing with Georgia. I got to give credit to that. I just love that part where we weren't really thinking about which guys are, never really entering the portal. He announced he's re-signing. I'm like, you know what, man, celebrate that, staying at Georgia. It was a big boost, obviously. He played a lot of meaningful snaps. He, played in every game last season. I just think to get that guy at the end of the draft, I think will be in the 2 deep for sure. Will probably, I wouldn't be surprised if he started half the season. I just think it's going to be a big spring for him. He's set up really well. He's seen his role increase the first 2 seasons. I think he's set up for success. And it is a player role and profile that Georgia puts a high premium on. A guy that's 6'4", 340, playing right there in the middle. That guy just makes everyone else's lives better. So I think when you're talking about those linebackers coming back, I think they'll be talking about, Nnamdi just making their life easier as, they're trying to break in and new centers. I think he's going to be the one that's yeah, good luck. Good luck taking going one-on-one with me. I just think that's where you're going to hear a lot about him this spring. I think all off season. I think it's going to be okay, maybe he just ends up starting at nose tackle and they just move Xavier Cloud around the rest of the line.
To your point, too, we don't know what Jordan Hall will be able to do during spring practice, which opens up opportunity for Nnamdi. Yeah, I believe he was the first Georgia player who was not an inside linebacker who had a sack last year because some of those guys, Chris Cole and C.J. Allen, did a really good job. And I think that's a really good value in this draft, getting Nnamdi. And I just want to say, me and Kipp, we were looking out for the Ogboko family. I don't know what's up with Ben, but, I really like the pick. I think Nnamdi's going to play quite a bit this year.
I went up to middle of nowhere, North Carolina, and watched them play a Monday night game. 2 years ago. Like I've given the Ugbogos their love. It was your opportunity to finally give them some love as well.
That's a fair point. All right, we're going into the seventh and the final round, and just so everybody kind of understands, so Kipp will pick first in this round. He needs an offensive lineman. I need a defensive back, and Ben needs a wide receiver. So Kipp, who you getting on that offensive line?
Well, the way I looked at it, there were like three fairly strong options. I mean, obviously, Jackson's been playing. Even got a spot start in there when they needed him to. He's new to football. Like every year, it's obviously the upside. He's going to get better and better. That's the thought process by bringing him in, which was still crazy to think about. Like what a crazy addition he was to the team. I think he got a great opportunity. Thought about him. Also, I mean, Daniel Calhoun, we thought he was going to be in line to start at guard, got passed up. And, but that's, again, like development, progression isn't linear. And you technically have got a new offensive line coach in there. So, you might impress him. So I thought about him. But spring breakout, I can't not pick Zyke Helton. Like, come on. Like, we just saw what Dontrell Glover did. And I get it. Like, there's just one position that we think is up for grabs. I talked about Daniel Calhoun, Michael Weenie, like they have experience there, but we just saw the experience. If the guy comes in and impresses, it doesn't really matter. And Glover took over. He came in the summer though. Like that's my thing. Like Zyke Helton's there now. He's already got a head start on what Glover did. And I think he's not the biggest guy, but we all watched the film. Like he is nasty. He's not like he's a mean football player. And I just look at that and I look at the offensive line and I look at guys who have had that kind of disposition. Like, Micah Morris, Juan Gaston, Drew Bobo, even Ernest Green, like, and Monroe, like those are guys that were just always known as nasty players. They just love finishing blocks. They just love like moving the pile. And Zyke, like I just think overall, like he does really well with that in space, his athleticism. So I think left guard, center, I just think he's going to play a lot of both spots. But like when you see a guy like that, is like what 6'2", 285, whatever, you see him line up as an edge rusher. I'm just like this guy's ridiculous. I'm not even sure that you keep him on the offensive line. That's probably one of the biggest recruiting battles of the offseason. So I just think, again, Georgia, we know they need a left guard. They're looking to see who can be the backup center. I just think the opportunity is there. He's going to come in, compete with Malachi Tolliver, compete with Cortez Smith, compete with Weenie Calhoun, the rest of the guys at guard. I just think he's got everything you look for to come in, grab an immediate role, and then never look back. That's the kind of player he projects to me. And, the fact that Glover just did it just makes it all like, even if he didn't do it, we'd still be talking about Zyke Helton, how everyone's praising him. I just think it's just set up. We've seen it happen. I think he is the freshman set up the best just to come in, take a job, and never give it up.
I really like that pick. I think going back to when we talked to Joseph Jonah Janye, he talked about how impressive that Zyke's feet, his footwork was, even as a freshman. And it sounded like, if I'm remembering right, Joseph basically said, like, I was going up against him thinking, look, I don't want to kill him. He's just a guy just out of high school. And then he quickly figured out, okay, this guy can hang. Ben, seemed like you were going to say something there about Zyke.
Yeah, it's a tough admission, but I just love Kipp's team. I mean, I think he did a great job putting his group together. The thing is, not only Jordan did you make me make some decisions that I didn't want to make, you also made me decide where I was going to be drafting, and I almost feel like me letting Kipp go 1, getting the guy that we all viewed as 1-1. Like I had to make too many decisions here. I had to make more decisions than you all had to make, because I had to pick where we were going to be drafting. And I used up so much of my decision-making strength in that, maybe the wrong decision then, that I then had to make some other decisions that were difficult throughout. So yeah, I really like where Kipp's positioned right now. I think our hope at this point, Jordan, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I think we might need Kirby Smart to say, like, maybe some of these guys had like some off-season like toe surgeries or something, so they're going to be late, whatever, and we just didn't know about it until next week. Otherwise, I think Kipp might have a runaway here.
Kipp's put together a good team, and I will say this. I'm so glad that I tortured you with the extra decisions. I hope it keeps you up tonight.
I also want to be very clear. I'm hoping that nobody on Kipp's team did have to have any kind of off-season surgeries or anything. If I'm thinking selfishly about having a chance of winning this draft, I think that might be the only hope that we have left.
All right, so I'm up next. I'm going defensive back, and I really like how this board fell for me. I'm picking Tyreek Green. I think about back when he was being recruited, Miami wanted him really, really badly, and Kirby Smart kind of took over that recruitment and said, we're getting this guy. And I can't help but think about the last time there was a safety at Buford that Georgia really, really, really wanted, and they wound up winning out on, and that was K.J. Bolton. And I really love watching Tyreek Green's film. I think when you look at him, he to me, he looks like a guy that you just find a home for him and he'll figure it out. And I think if I'm remembering correctly, he's a really big return threat too. So he could get in the mix on special teams. So I'm going with Tyreek Green. Ben, you covered his recruitment. Any thoughts on him, particularly that being my last pick in this draft?
I love him. For a long time, I said I thought he was the most underrated player in the recruiting class, not just Georgia's class, just the recruiting class period, because we had him as a relatively middle-of-the-road 3-star, and that's just not how all these schools that were recruiting him viewed him. You know, I think in both Tyreek Green's case, as well as Blake Stewart's case, as well as Jordan Smith's case, who I think is probably more likely to start at corner than safety as we head into the spring, just from what I've been told. But I think that all three of those guys have opportunities to establish themselves in the rotation this year. You know, we're fresh off a season where we saw by the end of it, Rayshawn Dinkins has sort of leapfrogged Jonel Aguero. So if you can play and you have the opportunity to make plays in the defensive backfield, you're going to get on the field early. And, you know, I think Tyreek Green, because of his positional versatility, but I also think he's someone that could play that star position and be really, really dangerous at it. I'm not saying that he's going to give Rayshawn Dinkins a run right off the jump, but I think that he has the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, you mentioned Jordan Smith. That was kind of the two guys I was back and forth on, but I remembered you mentioning Jordan might be playing corner, and I kind of feel like there's just a lot of experience there, so I went with Tyreek instead. All right, Ben, we're going to receiver, but before you get your pick, I want you to tell me who you thought I was between, and then you can get into which guy you're actually getting.
Well, it's funny because I thought you were going to take Isaiah Canyon, which I think would have been a very logical pick. And I'm just going to say right now, he's going to be the snub of the draft. He's somehow, Georgia went into the transfer portal. We've seen them do it with Noah Thomas. We've seen them do it with Colby Young. Obviously, those guys are going to play. You only have so many big X types on your roster. And, like, really, it's him and CJ Wiley are the two. So, like, honestly, I'm going to look silly when Isaiah Canyon's doing things this spring, but you guys are going to look just as silly. So I'm okay living with it. He is going to play because you went and took one receiver out of the portal. It was that guy, very specifically tailor-made for what they like to do at that position. I'm going to take one of my all-time favorite players that I had the chance to cover during his recruitment, and you mentioned him when you were talking about receiver, Jordan, and that's Jacoby White-Helton. And I get it. There are guys on this list, Isaiah Canyon, CJ Wiley, Thomas Blackshear, Landon Roldan, that all deserve to have been picked. And we only were able to take 3, but every single one of those guys I just named, I think, is going to be a playmaker. I'm going with Sacovie White for a couple reasons. One, I just mentioned one of my all-time favorite players that I covered. I love his family. I love his story. I think he is a truly special person, and I think that he is a truly special player. Why do I think he's a truly special player? We just saw Georgia have maybe the best slot receiver type player that they have ever had in Zachariah Branch. He's the all-time single season receptions leader. And Sacovie White was still getting opportunities last year. He was still being used all throughout the season. Was he getting 50 snaps a game? No, but he's making big first down receptions in the Sugar Bowl. Like, he's getting involved in the SEC championship game. And for Georgia to do that and get you on the field when you have a guy like Zachariah Branch, Georgia did not want to run the risk of losing Sacovie White. They knew what they had. They know what they have. They wanted to make sure that this was a guy that felt wanted enough at Georgia that he never once considered hitting the transfer portal after last season. Compounding that, Georgia does take a look at Trey Richardson out of the transfer portal, out of Vanderbilt, to be that potential slot. And I thought early on in that transfer portal window that they were going to go get Isaiah Canyon as the big X, and then they were going to go get a slot receiver, whether that be Trey Richardson or someone else. And they had Trey Richardson come in on that visit, and then he ends up, looking at Texas and then commits to Louisville. And Georgia decides they don't need to go and get a guy in the transfer portal at slot. Now, I think there's a couple reasons for that beyond just Sacovie White. Kipp mentioned it when he was taking his 1-1. Talon Taylor can do that. And so I think that Talon Taylor is one of those receivers, and I don't want to give like a overly lofty comparison to Justin Jefferson, but someone that I think you can just line up anywhere and he's going to be able to create mismatches wherever it is that he's lined up. So I think we will see Talon Taylor all across the field. You mentioned Craig Dandridge as someone that I think probably could play the slot. From talking with James Coley at the Sugar Bowl, I feel like he's going to get tested out more at Z to start than at slot, which I think is why we're going to see some Talon Taylor snaps, and then we're also going to see a lot of Sacovie White-Helton. I believe as much as you can believe in a player that we haven't seen a ton of as you can in Sacovie White. That's how I feel about Sacovie White-Helton. I think he is going to be that guy. I am not even kidding you. I was considering taking him in like the second round, third round range when I was debating between him and Isaiah Canyon. And I said, you know what? I don't want to take Sacovie in the second or third round and then just freely give Jordan his pick of the litter at receiver, thinking that it probably was going to be Isaiah Canyon. So the fact that I'm now getting a player that I adore as much as I do, Sacovie White, I'm thrilled to be getting him with Mr. Irrelevant of the spring breakout draft. And I just think that he's someone that is going to get a lot of touches this spring, but also during the 2026 season.
I think I mentioned it earlier, but I think Sacovie has to be looked at as the favorite to start at the slot receiver position. And he's a guy I think falls in the same category that Ben talked about with Jaden Riddell, where it's like he's back. He very clearly, he wants to be at Georgia, but Georgia sees value in him and sees that he's got a lot of potential. And, I mentioned it earlier too. I mean, he was playing in the Sugar Bowl, and that was a win-or-go-home situation for Georgia. They very clearly felt comfortable putting him out there and letting him try to make plays. And I seem to remember he had a catch at a pretty crucial moment in that game. So I think that if that's going to be the Mr. Irrelevant, I think we've done okay. There's definitely been some omissions, but I think that we've put together a pretty good draft.
Now, I will say, and I'm the one that made the final decision that had it go this way, it is egregious that Isaiah Canyon is not on any of our teams. I'm just going to say that. Now, Kipp, I don't know if you can take too much of the heat on that one because you took the guy that we all were going to take 1-1 as the receiver. So you weren't really given the opportunity beyond that to take wide receiver. Jordan, I think there will be some points throughout the spring where we're hearing about things that Isaiah Canyon did during scrimmages and we're saying, we both decided not to go with that guy. That's kind of crazy.
I've made a home on Craig Dandridge's island. People on the board know that I'm very excited, so I felt like I had to be true to me. And Isaiah Canyon's probably going to start, so it probably is fairly stupid that we didn't pick him. But I'm comfortable with my decision.
Yeah, we get with the hope we can have, and I guess to anybody that listens, they will know that we didn't take him. Anybody that just sees the graphics that we put out might just assume that Isaiah Canyon wasn't an available player to be taken for one reason or another. So that's what we can for the people on social, don't listen to this.
Good call. That's a great way to grow our listenership. All right, so we're going to go through the three teams, and then we're going to talk just briefly about each of our teams. All right, so Kipp had the first pick, and now we are going in the order that they were picked. Kipp went receiver Talon Taylor, tight end Caden Prothro, running back Dante Dowdell, defensive back Khalil Barnes, front seven member Josh Horton, front seven member Nnamdi Ogboko, and then offensive lineman Zaki Helton. I had the second pick, and I went front seven member Valden Sohn, offensive lineman Akine Ogboko, tight end Lincoln Keys, receiver Craig Dandridge, front seven member Isaiah Gibson, running back Bo Walker, and defensive back Tyreek Green. And then Ben had the third pick. He got front seven member Amaris Williams, defensive back Jamarly Riddle, front seven member Chase Linton, offensive lineman Cortez Smith, running back Dwight Phillips Jr., tight end Jaden Riddell, and wide receiver Sokovia White-Helton. So, Kipp, you had the first pick. So just tell us how you feel about your team as a whole, and if there's one of the other two teams that you like, go ahead and shout out whoever's team that was.
Listen, I don't know how I can't keep getting away with it, but yeah, it's going to be a shock to everyone watching and listening that I absolutely love my team. I think from top to bottom, they're all going to be guys that get talked about a lot this spring. All of their roles are going to be increasing. I think the one thing we kind of learned over the draft is that maybe we should have had two wide receiver slots, because I'm looking at it and I agree. Like with Ben, I had Isaiah like number 6 overall on my board because I didn't expect to have the number 1 overall pick. I was like, all right, I got to get this guy. But then even then, like Sokovia White, I had 10th. I actually had CJ Wiley number 9 because I'm just like, man, like he knows like this spring is a big spring for him. And I just think knowing that they did bring in another guy that's a big downfield pass catcher, that like he is motivated, just going to say, okay, you guys brought this guy in, but you know what? I have the skill set and I could bring that to the table too. And Sokovia, yeah, you look at the slot, it's like, it's kind of the breakout that maybe fans don't want to hear. They want to hear a lot of like Sokovia's just like catching 30 passes at the line of scrimmage. That's kind of like he might break out, but then also like you might hear some groans from fans, but you do have to remember like Sokovia actually makes plays downfield as well.
I was going to say that. I think his downfield pedigree is a little bit better than Zachariah's is in some respects.
Which just makes it all the more befuddling how Zachariah was utilized at Georgia. That's a whole nother conversation. But I think Sokovia, like, he's obviously a guy that can't be tackled, but like in one-on-one, it's impossible, and he's just really strong too. So specifically the wide receiver position, I think what we established is that like there was a lot of depth for breakout performances this spring. So I think taking that position first on the surface feels like, okay, I just went from the deepest position first, but I love Talon Taylor. I just think like that guy is the like true number 1 that Georgia needs. When you're seeing the guys rotating in and out, guys have specific skill sets. I just think he's the one guy that's like, he's got all the skill sets. He just brings everything to the table that they need. But overall, I knew this was going to be a deep like draft at multiple positions. And I think overall, like especially like I said, at wide receiver and also at DB, you just have a lot of guys stepping in the big roles. Like I'm shocked Gentry Williams wasn't picked. Mm-hmm. I think he's going to push DeMello Jones all spring. Like they don't go and get a guy that is a when healthy, capable starter at cornerback if they're not saying, listen, we want to make sure we have a guy capable of pushing to start. So I just think after wide receiver, he, in my opinion, was probably like the biggest snub of guys not taken. But it just also, like I said, it says a lot. I think there's Georgia retaining a young roster. This is the benefit. You just have breakout guys all over the place. So overall, I think like all of these teams are going to just, I mean, you're going to have 3 or 4 guys per team that have big springs.
Yeah, I want to mention too a receiver, a guy I don't think we mentioned. Landon Rolden was another guy that I at least considered drafting for my team. Overall, I really like my team. To me, and this is really not a shock, what's going to determine when we have the vote at the end of the spring, if my team were to win, I think it rides on Craig Dandridge and I think it rides on Isaiah Gibson. But the good thing is that there are a lot of people paying attention really to both of those guys. But I really like my team. I think I did a better job of kind of following Ben's playbook. I mentioned this during the podcast that Ben does a really good job of saying, all right, this is what these guys still need, so I can wait on this and prioritize other positions. And I hate to do this, but yeah, I mean, if I have to pick another team, Kipp did a very good job drafting his group. I think that really, maybe the best pick, I think, of the later rounds is Ike Helton, because he's a guy that, we usually do like bold predictions going into spring, and I'm still kind of thinking about some. But my bold prediction may very well be that Ike Helton comes out of spring as a starting offensive guard. I think that highly of him. So very good draft for Kipp. Ben, what's your thoughts on your team and any team that you want to shout out as well?
Well, if I had to do it over again, I was debating so hard between Jamarly Riddle and Caden Prothro with that number 2, with my second round pick. And because I would have felt totally fine about Tyreek Green or Jordan Smith or Gentry Williams or even Blake Stewart, I probably could have run the risk of not being able to get Jamarly Riddle, which I don't even know after things have played out where he even stood on y'all's board. So I probably overdrafted him in that respect. But I probably would have liked someone that I think is going to be a more notable playmaker at tight end, because I think Jaden Riddell might even be ahead of Caden Prothro on the depth chart. But a lot of what I think he's going to improve on year over year is going to be what he does in line compared to what he does out wide. And I think that Caden Prothro is now kind of slotting in to where Jaden Riddell was when he got here, which, if you remember, Jaden Riddell's first spring was when we probably heard the most Jaden Riddell noise, because there was no expectation for him to be doing anything in line. It was just, you haven't blocked in your career, go out wide, make some plays and make some noise. I think that's what Caden Prothro is going to do this spring. And so if I had to do it all over again, I probably would have taken Caden there and then made a different decision in the secondary. I think, much like you said, Jordan, like your draft's riding on some things. Like my draft is riding on Cortez Smith snapping the ball to Gunnar Stockton during the spring game. If Cortez Smith isn't the first team center snapping the ball, assuming that Drew Bobo is not able to go by the spring game, then I don't think that I have any chance in the post-spring draft to be able to win this one. But I think that if Cortez has established himself as the center that's snapping to Gunnar, I think that will help matters. And then I just think that Sokovie White is, built to just have some awesome playmaking throughout the spring. So I think hearing his name more and more, the fact that will end up being the last pick of the entire draft, I do think it's going to reflect positively on me. Though I could have taken him or Isaiah Canyon, and I think that was going to say it. But yeah, I mean, Kipp has the best. As we're sitting here right now, Kipp drafted the best team, and I think it's hard to deny that.
Yeah, just think if you would have had that first overall pick, it could have been a totally different game for you.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I would have taken Talon 1-1, so it would have, I wouldn't have I ended up taking receiver last. I would have changed everything that I did. But I will say I feel great about having, this is where it's a little tricky. I feel great about having Amaris Williams and Chase Linton, because I think they're the 2 best pass rushers on the entire roster. How much does that really show itself in spring? How much do you really hear because their quarterbacks aren't able to be touched in many settings that they're doing things. So it's like, you don't even really know how much of an impact they're making when it comes to getting to the quarterback. So that's maybe the risk that I'm running there, but I do feel great about having them because I think they are the 2 best pass rushers on the team.
If you're hearing this or watching this, just remember this. If you come away a few weeks from now and you're like, Man, Ben has asked Kirby about the pass rushers like 5 press conferences in a row. Hey, they're getting buzz. I didn't say how they were doing it. We are talking about them.
No, that's a little trick. That's an advantage that Jordan has. He's in more press conferences than the rest of us are. So if he ever needs to get a little buzz out there about some of the guys on his team, it's just a question away.
Bo
Maybe
Walker.
I do need to cover pro day. We got to manufacture some breakout here. And you know what? Honestly, for thinking about it, like, is Talon Taylor, like, if it was week 1, I'm not sure he's starting. Like, that's just the depth. Like, London Humphreys, Sokovie White, and Isaiah Kanyon are probably your starters if you want to get technical with that. So I think for multiple positions, it's hard to like pin down what means breakout, but I think a lot of these guys are really going to have strong springs. So, but to your point about the pass rusher, yeah, that is why I took interior defensive lineman, because I mean, they're going to be making life hard for Georgia's running backs. So I think there is a little bit of gamesmanship on thinking what is the potential for breakout and how you define that based on how we cover spring football.
I want to make sure and say, if you're watching or listening to this, we're going to have 2 polls up for you to pick who you thought had the best of the spring breakouts draft. The poll on the board at dogs247.com will go up Thursday afternoon. Should have the poll on X as well. Once we've got the podcast posted, it'll be on there. We'll probably put on there where folks can vote for about a week. And then, like I mentioned, we will circle back at the end of the spring and have another vote. And we'll also just look at our teams and see who wound up having the best team and which players stood out over the course of spring. So I want to thank Kipp and Ben for popping on and doing this episode again. This is one of my favorite episodes we do every year. And like I mentioned, we'll do another one before fall camp gets going. Thanks to everyone who watched this live, everyone who's watching or listening to it after the fact. Be sure and go subscribe to dogs247.com. Again, probably the best time of the year just because there's so many different sports all in action at once. And we're really leading up to, the football season is still several months away, but spring practice gives us a chance to learn about this team and get ready and kind of get the countdown going before the end of August and September. Subscribe to the Junkyard Dawgcast wherever you get your podcast. Please rate and review. Helps us out a ton. Subscribe to the YouTube Dogs247, the TikTok, also on there as well. A lot of good video content. And again, busy time of the year right around the corner, but we are super excited for it. So we'll end the episode right there. For Kipp Adams and Ben Wolk, I'm Jordan Hill. Until next time, take care, everybody.